Hello, I'm Jerome Turner. I'm from Birmingham Centre for Media and Cultural Research at Birmingham City University. And a bit of context, I've been overhearing the Archers all my life, but properly started listening around about 2004 onwards. So this paper presents the findings of a listener survey I ran recently, exploring current listening practices, the extent to which these might have changed, and what this means for our association with the show. So I think I started thinking about the context for this piece of work about a year or so ago. So there'll be a bit of audience interaction with this. So my first question is, who's heard of Minecraft? Oh great, much better than I expected. So I don't need to explain what it is, but I sometimes play it on my mobile on the train commute. So it's essentially, it's a game you play on a phone or an Xbox or whatever in a kind of virtual world. And I managed to find a way to play Spotify music or Archers episodes in the background as I did so I could do Minecraft and Archers on the commute, everything at once. And then one day, this happened. So it's a short clip, but just listen to what's going on.
So much for catching up on my beauty sleep.
Children's astronomy has got very competitive.
Well, they were certainly having fun. Every time I was dropping off, I could hear waves of laughter. Right. Come on, let's get you out, shall we? Go on.
So sometimes the stars align and you're tending to your sheep in Minecraft while David's tending to his sheep in the show, and you've got kind of like double sheep. And this got me wondering about how people's experiences of the show might have changed over the years and what that might reflect about how we use media today. So I've essentially got time for one slide of theory before I go into all the findings. But perhaps, so start with, perhaps the stereotype of the Archers listener is that it's in the kitchen, during chores, and this kind of aligns with Sean Moore's and Hobson's work situating radio in the family home and its routines, essentially. But Hobson also talks about it being a lifeline to the outside world. So this ties then quite neatly into Raymond Williams' theory of mobile privatisation, where media and an increasing choice in media, this kind of around about the 1980s, I think, takes the viewer out of the home. So it's less about media as mass consumption and more about people being empowered and having agency in using it. And then, as technologies allow it, scholars such as Bull and DeGay stress the significance of being able to locate that to the individual, so with the Walkman initially, and then now, of course, with smartphones. So, these are my research questions. How do people listen to the Archers today? Does listening context and habit affect our association with the show? And what do listeners get out of it? And how can we update our picture of a typical Archers listener? So I approached this with an online survey through Google Forms. This is the point where if you completed it and you want to, you can stick your hand up. Okay, so that's a good chunk of you. So this stayed live for a month. It was shared on Facebook groups and Twitter, resulting in 2,413 responses. And when I launched it, I thought it might get around about that many, but I kind of knew, so I was kind of prepared for it. So first of all, a huge thank you to all those people that completed it, and obviously a lot of those people aren't in the room, so if you're watching on the live stream or whatever, thank you again. I should point out though that this means that the survey was obviously self-selecting, so more Archers fans rather than people who might just overhear it and grumble about it. And actually, I think we do have to recognise that is part of the listening experience for some people. So it is like our partners who don't get it, that they are listeners in a way as well. And it also represents only the digitally engaged because of the fact that it was advertised on Facebook, or their people's abilities to do an online form or not, if they are or aren't on the internet. So I did actually ask Radio Times to try and help me deal with this, to kind of get to people who listen on radio only and aren't digitally engaged, but they weren't actually able to run anything in that to kind of get more responses, essentially. It's worth noting that a larger funded study would probably also include complementary methods such as interviews
and research funding.
Yes. And finally, what I'm presenting today hasn't yet gone through a full thematic analysis of all the long responses, but I'm happy to discuss that with anyone over a coffee later, because I'm planning to do a bit more of that. So I'll keep this relatively fast moving. Any questions, please jot them down. We'll cover them at some point later on. So for each one of these, I'm going to ask for very quick responses, lightning responses. First of all, do you think most people identify as an active listener, making efforts to listen on radio or catch up, or more passive? So active or active, right. Okay. So mostly active, yeah. And as I mentioned, this obviously may be a factor of the people that answered being self-selecting, but it's already a pretty clear indication of how passionately people feel about the Archers. And when do you listen? Do you listen live on the radio or afterwards on catch-up? Both, right. So yeah, a large chunk of that is both actually. So there's some that will do one or the other. So interesting, in the blue here, a lot of those active listeners from the previous chart are doing so during the scheduled shows, but most commonly people said both. So they're kind of using catch-up to fill the holes in their listening. How do you listen? So I've got lots of options here for people to select from, but what method do you think was the most, in terms of the technology, what method do you think was the most? Radio, yeah. Okay, so, so no surprises, DAB and FM radio are the highest here. So there's again this sense that we use the traditional stereotypical method, stereotypical again, no pun intended, but supplement it with other methods and in ways that allow the media to stick with us, like the smartphone. What do you do while listening? Anyone? Top response. So I'm hearing a lot of kitchen activities. So again, this really fits the bill of the picture that Moores and Hobson drew. So it also matches a lot of the childhood overhearing accounts people gave that we'll come to. So it may be that we're subconsciously drawn to holding on to that nostalgic feeling in the ways that we listen. But these top three are also a factor of when the show is on and what it coincides with and how it becomes a part of the furniture of our everyday routines. So kitchen work, eating a meal together, commuting, etc. So having said that, I was amazed at how many people actually said they stopped to listen, so 500, and another 500 people also said they sat aside particular time just to listen. And there was a very long tail of additional responses people added of things they did. I remember one of them, particularly, which felt like very, very Archers, was mucking the horses out. What's the most unusual place you've listened? So this was an open field response, so I got all kinds of answers. And so I'm glad somebody broke the back of using word clouds yesterday, but essentially this presents a word cloud showing the most frequently common used words in these responses. So the top shows, so ignoring some of the other common words here, like Archers listen, holiday features 120 times. So again, with that idea of the Walkman and the personalised experience being able to travel with us, but this is something extra than just our choice of music or our mixtape. It's a slice of the home of family life in our pocket, travelling with us. And note that nearly all the people here who used the word unusual in their response, I went through all those because I was interested, they were actually saying that they did not listen in unusual places, so that they felt so you could have a whole other conversation about what somebody means by usual or unusual, I suppose. Do you feel differently about the show depending on where you're listening to it? What do you think the response was generally? Right. And you're right. And that's actually one of the things that I was expecting to turn out a bit the other way. So mostly no, and no answer I would take. And no answer I would take. Yeah. So if people gave no answer, I was also taking that to mean a no, like if they kind of left it blank. And also note, this is only people who literally just typed no. So there were a lot of people that said no and then qualified it with more of a response, and then that then goes up to 74% of respondents said no, didn't feel any different. So this again kind of supports that idea that we feel the same way about the show wherever we are and have those kinds of homely affective associations with it inside or outside the house. So this is about kind of any change in your listening habits. So do you think, what kind of responses do you think we're getting from that? Yeah? Yeah, more of that. So again, I haven't gone through all the responses, but only a few people said no, and other people said a whole multitude of things. But, and you can't really create a word cloud from it, but scanning the responses, people talked about either the way their habits changed with their lifestyle and changing daily routine. So people that used to listen when they were doing the kids' bath, but now their kids are older and they don't do that, so they've had to find different ways to listen. And the other reason being it's a result of the catch-up technologies offer to listen anytime, any place. I've got my phone here actually, so. Earliest memories of hearing or listening to the Archers. So I'll go straight into anybody care to?
Grandparents.
Yeah, so the kind of things that come up in this word cloud are childhood, parents, background, Sunday, car, background sounds. So variants of the word child came up 544 times. So that's about a quarter of the responses, but yeah. So fewer people talked about picking it up from friends or other social influences. So the word friend actually only came up 91 times in these responses. Biggest event to impact you? Anyone? So, 893 people had Helen in their response. So part of this is, of course, because it's a recent event stuck in our memory. Maybe also a sense that saying anything other than Helen would suggest we'd overlooked it as significant when answering the question. Death comes up 598 times, which is interesting because no one died in the Helen storyline, really, did they? So it's talking about other deaths a lot of the time.
That's interesting.
So maybe it tells us something about how affected we are by the loss of characters. But I didn't know if there also might be a sense of one-upmanship, so people demonstrating being a longer time listener and reaching further back. But actually only 242 people mentioned John. So maybe that wasn't the case so much. Only 18 people mentioned the flood, so it's kind of more about the characters than the big events themselves. How well do you know the characters? This isn't massively surprising, so I'll move on. But this is a nice one. How does listening to the show make you feel? One word, anyone? Cross? Well, no, not cross. Actually, Sorry, I've got so much to get through. Such a short time. 280 people, so 18, nearly 10% of respondents said comfortable. So I find it interesting that what non-listeners perceive as dull, we see as comfort. So people will listen to or watch the other drama media for thrills, excitement, tension, laughs, etc. But we enjoy the comfort. So last week on the Facebook group, someone asked why there wasn't more of Brexit in the show, and everyone replied they were happy about that we used the show partly to escape all that. So note also happy and relaxed. How do you talk to people about the show? So given the recruitment, Facebook groups are always going to come up high. I'm going to move on very quickly. Why do you listen to it? I'm sure many people have asked you this over the years, but people refer to the characters 408 times rather than storylines, suggesting this kind of effective emotional attachment again. 358 people talked about habit, going back to the significance of being a part of everyday routines for them, almost since childhood. So, conclusion slide, just squeezing in. Much of the practice here is still rooted, and sorry, when I say practice, I mean the things you do, is still rooted in the traditional radio format though, so whether DAB or FM, or built around everyday practices such as kitchen work. So this makes me think of how, the internet is often argued by many scholars to be supplementing rather than replacing other offline social experiences. But practices have changed, either because people's lifestyle or everyday routine has changed, or because they're using the digital options to catch up. We might assume the top 3 activities people do in combination, so kitchen, eating and driving, are live, as they listen live, but evidence that people's everyday experiences and early experiences of listening during childhood are reconstituted ongoing. So what I don't know if this is a constant or moves in waves. So do we listen in childhood, ease off around the middle, and return in our 30s as we become our parents? And is that what's kept it going as a show for so long, more than anything else? So the findings also build on some of the theory I mentioned at the start, but here we have a sense of the home travelling out of the house with us on holiday, for example. But people saying that didn't change their experience, so using that as a comfort blanket maybe, hence comfortable. And finally, Archers listeners are passionate, will go to lengths to ensure that they don't miss episodes, and new digital methods allow them to ensure that they don't miss out. So this is evidenced partly in how many people said they set aside time to listen, 500 people, in a world of second screening where we often watch TV while on Twitter or Facebook, so that's quite significant. The end.
Anything you want to ask Des about his findings, which is so interesting? Oh, yeah.
Shall I turn on this one?
Yeah.
That's working.
Yes. That's on. Is it on?
No, it will be.
Should.
Hello?
I wanted to ask you, at the beginning you asked us how many of us have heard of Minecraft, and you seem to be a bit surprised. What suppositions have you come to about?
So I know about Minecraft because I've got very young kids that play it, and
so these are two separate screens.
It wasn't.
and I play it, so I don't know. And actually, not a lot of people that I know generally know about Minecraft anyway. Generally, so. How many people play Minecraft in the room? So not okay. 5, 6, yeah. Okay. Great. Yes, exactly. You're right. Teenage children or grandchildren that might play it as well. You're right. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you looked into a correlation between the listening habits based on demographics such as age.
No, because, okay. So on one level, I didn't do any correlation kind of work. Partly because I don't usually work with data and SPSS and those kind of things, and I don't know how to do it. So I didn't approach it from the basis that I was going to do that. But secondly, for the research question that I was looking at, I felt like I didn't need to ask people about age and sex and things like that. And I'm kind of a strong believer of not asking people things in research for the sake of asking them because it might be interesting, but for the research question. So in terms of ethics,
yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't listen if it was on the radio. If it wasn't on podcast, I wouldn't be listening to it.
Yeah.
So I think it probably is.
Yeah, and actually,
We can interview you later.
and actually, it kept the survey shorter. So a lot of people said they enjoyed doing it, and I think part of that is because it was short, hopefully, and to the point, and didn't ask what sometimes can feel like extraneous questions. But you're right. Later on, I was thinking, it would have been nice, possibly, to have known the age of some of these people.
I was just going to ask whether there were very many other people who listen in bed, whether that came out in your...
So I put all the long
We've got
answers...
28% on our table.
Oh right, well there you go. I put all the long answers into my NVivo, software analysis thing. I haven't properly done the analysis yet, but scrolling through stuff, and a lot of the answers I saw to start with, yes, that kind of thing came up quite a lot. The bath, the bed, that kind of thing did come up. I can't tell you how often it's come up yet, but I will be able to in the future, that kind of thing. So.
That's not the first time I've sat in a conference and listened to the articles with other families. Because it was programmed for the science fiction EastCon some time back. But how much does what you're doing on the arts correlate to people who have other families? Not just Minecraft, but other media families.
Oh, okay. So, what other media fandom does it kind of Venn diagram overlap with a lot? I don't know actually. And it's interesting you kind of frame it in terms of fandom. So how many people would say you were listening? Put your hand up if you're a listener to the Archers. Right, put your hands down. Put your hands up if you are a fan of the Archers. Did anybody not put their hands up for both of those things?
Cara.
Right, so the question is, what's the difference between being an audience member and fandom? And I've got colleagues that work in fandom studies and subcultural studies and things like that. It's less my area, but it's an area I'm quite interested in creeping into.
We did something on that. Was it the second book? I can't remember. We tried to write about ACCA fandom and all this kind of thing. And it is a kind of quite a big subculture of cultural studies. The thing that I've noticed that's quite interesting is this intersection with Comic-Con, because that's like an accepted thing. People know about Comic-Con, and if you're into sci-fi, then you do those things. And I did notice that your mate Tim Bentic was at Bath Comic-Con this weekend, and I was thinking, what's that going to be like? You've got Doctor Who room, and and then there'll be the Archers room with him in his tweeds, and I was thinking, gosh. And we have kind of flirted with the idea of, sort of dress up and all that kind of stuff, because it is much more... No, don't worry. No. There are like established practices. There are like, it's much... So I was saying to one of my junior staff, I was like, I've been to one of Oxford, and she was like, oh yeah, well, I haven't been to my feminist Harry Potter group for a few weeks. And I was like, okay. So I think it's part of this thing about the more collective experience. People do find each other, other, readers.
I'd just like to respond to Nicola's point about Comic-Con and dressing up. Have you ever seen Galaxy Quest? No. Oh, then that's one a bit flat, hasn't it?
What is it?
Yeah, I'll explain later.
Right.
I didn't look specifically at Scotland and Wales, but I didn't exclude anybody globally because it was an international online. It had potential to spread that far, so it was spread through a few Facebook groups and through Twitter, as they seemed to be a good starting point. And by the time I'd got 1,000 responses within 24 hours, I didn't feel the need to spread it much further. But despite this thing I say of kind of recognising that I didn't get what we might think of, not passive listeners, but people who listen to FM radio only and wouldn't have seen my recruitment call. So that's a bit of a gap. But
bear in mind, if you do online social science, you could expect, say what happened with your other survey. You got 30 responses.
Yeah, I did. I also had a response for some evaluation work we were doing about arts and culture and funding in Birmingham, which was a whacking great big long survey, but was very important for us. And we wanted 30 responses, and we got 23. So I was quite happy to tell my colleagues I got over 2,000 for this one.
Just last question.
I'd like to ask you talked about people listening on radio. And then you made the assumption that the digital media that was used for listening, or appeared to make the assumption that digital media used for listening was the smartphone. Did you investigate the use of any other?
So I kind of, I think that question was one of the ones where I kind of gave a list of people for people to choose from. So on that list were things like listening in your car, or listening on your car through a downloaded episode on your smartphone and things like that. But I left an other box as well that people could add their own ones as well. So there is a kind of a tail of other things that people added. So what kind of things did you have in mind particularly?
I use my tablet.
Yes, so sorry. So at least one person said, "Oh, you didn't give the option of tablet," and so there might have been. So we went. Was it you that we went into a bit of a discussion about? So with somebody, and I was saying, "Oh, well, maybe just for the purposes of this, because I can't add tablet now because we're halfway through it. Tick smartphone, if you see what I mean." But you're right. That's a failing that I just didn't put that one in there.
So there we are. New listening practices in action.
That's still on.
Right.